But a car, oh, well, we name cars.
Can we be friends? What's your name? ¿Qué? I just call you Ocho, okay?
Hi, I'm Justin Barrett. I'm president of Blueprint 1543. I am a psychological scientist and former university professor. And in this episode, I want to share with you a conversation that was sparked in one of my team meetings at Blueprint 1543. The question before us is, should I call my robot, my vacuum robot, Rhett the Butler? Or more generally, what is the deal with naming technology? And should it make us uncomfortable, or should we just go ahead and do it and have fun naming our robots and our cars and maybe our computers as well?
R2-D2, a pleasure to meet you. I am C3PO Human Cyborg Relations.
One of my teammates at Blueprint 1543, she's a good Southern gal, and she confessed to us that she calls her vacuum cleaner robot thing Rhett the Butler.
Sir, you are no gentleman.
And you, miss, are no lady. Oh. Don't think that I hold that against you.
And so she asked, anything wrong with doing that? Because we were having a conversation about naming various technologies. In my house, for instance, one of our cars is named Gladys.
Now that was silly.
Now that was the previous owner's name for the car, but we decided to go ahead and keep it. And so we refer to one of our cars as Gladys. And what about Rhett the Butler? I want to first observe that we are only tempted to name certain kinds of technology, right? Not all technologies get named. I generally don't try to name my eyeglasses or my shoes or even a hammer or a chainsaw. But usually the kind of technology that we are tempted to name are those that mimic certain signs of, well, the jargon is intentional agency. That is, they exhibit signs of having goals and purposes and being able to sort of initiate their own action and not just react to the world around them. Okay, that's what we call intentional agents. And from infancy, research shows that babies are very sensitive to detecting who are the agents in the world and what are the non-agents, what are just the mere objects in the world, because we treat agents very differently than we treat non-agents, right? When it's an agent, already, again, in infancy, babies are more inclined to declaratively gesture in their, to get their attention, to babble at them, to vocalize, to do all of these things, to say, I treat that differently than an object. An object, babies don't babble at it. They don't point for it to, hey, go do that. They just go and manhandle it or pick it up, throw it, touch it. It's these things that sort of come close to being agents that we're inclined to name. What does it mean, come close? They're pushing the right kinds of input buttons. They are giving some of the signs of agency enough that our social cognition that handles agents starts going, okay, I think I'm seeing an agent here. It's when they launch themselves, for instance, or fail to launch themselves when they should be doing what they're doing. They seem to have their own goals or directions that they're aimed at. Those kinds of things are predictable signs of, there's an agent here. And so when we've got these complex machines that give those kinds of cues, we think that they're agents. Now, those aren't all sort of new high-tech things like robots. People have been naming ships, so I'm wearing my ship's tie today, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Who knows, maybe thousands of years. Well, why is that? Well, big sailing ships like the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria or the Mary Rose or whichever your favorite ship is, they are complex machines that can behave slightly unpredictably in certain kinds of environments. And so people who are spending a lot of time on them and are very sensitive to how to sail, because they're good sailors, know that each ship behaves slightly differently, as if they've got their own will or their own personalities and so forth. So it's easy to slip into that if you are a sailing type of person. Of course, for most of us, a ship is just a ship. But a car, oh, well, we name cars.
Can we be friends? What's your name? ¿Qué? I just call you Ocho.
But we name these things. Why? Because sometimes cars just don't behave. Notice that language. They don't do what they're supposed to do. They're complex enough machines that they can sort of trick our brains into thinking they have a will of their own. They have their own desires and purposes. So we might try to talk nice to our car. We might pat our car. We might say, hey, I'm going to give you an oil change if you behave in this one more trip. There's something about the complexity of the car, its apparent violations of our intuitive sense of how causation works, that makes it seem like an agent at various times. And of course, computers and robots take this to the next level.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So those are the kinds of things we're inclined to name. It's these complex machines that mimic the signs of agency. But what does then the naming do to us psychologically? Once we name an agent, a car, a ship, or I don't know, our vacuum cleaner robot, we are acting as if it is an agent. We're buying into that kind of mindset. We're taking the brakes off of our own social cognition, saying, which is sort of in that sort of uncanny valley space of is it an agent or is it not? We're going ahead and say, well, I'm going to go ahead and act as if it's an agent. Maybe there's a big part of me that says it's not an agent, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it. That's what's going on psychologically when we name it, and it sort of takes the brakes off, like I said, and allows us to activate more of our social cognition, it's called. Our tendency to treat this as an agent, as a person, okay? And that can be kind of fun. We're sort of playing into it, and it opens us up to treating those machines in very different kinds of ways, like exhibiting more care for it, like, being courteous towards it.
Yes, sir.
The old girl's still eager, isn't she? But of course very Homely.
I may be homely, Buster, but I'm SMART smart.
I've found myself with good old Gladys, my car, patting the car and saying, you're a good car, Gladys. As after I've given it a fill up of maybe, I'm indulging it with some premium gasoline. I'm like, there you go, Gladys, you've been a good girl. And I don't think I'm crazy. I think that I'm like a lot of people in these situations. That naming of a complex machine triggers my tendency to care for it. And there's at least some research suggesting that people who name their cars really do take better care of their cars as well. So if you're in the used car market, look for a car that has been named. It's likely to have been better cared for because that social cognition, I've got an agent, also triggers this, and I have different obligations to an agent than I would otherwise. I have obligations of care. I care for agents. It's for these very reasons that we see in a lot of movies and other kinds of entertainment settings, this common theatrical device of naming complex machines, especially robots.
I am Optimus Prime.
So that they become not just machines in the stories, but they become characters. It's common in movies. Using that naming convention helps draw the audience into, this is a personality. This is a someone in this story that's being told and not just an object, not just a machine. So think of Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Good evening, Dave.
How you doing, Hal?
Everything's running smoothly. And you?
Oh, not too bad.
Or C-3PO and R2-D2 from Star Wars.
I've just about had enough of you. Go that way. You'll be malfunctioning within a day, you nearsighted scrap pile. And don't let me catch you following me, begging for help, because you won't get it.
Wall-E.
Wally.
Or Iron Man's Jarvis.
Jarvis, you there?
At your service, sir.
Right? Once we name them, they become more than machines. They become someone's. They activate our social cognition and then certain kinds of moral feelings that go along with that. That's what's going on psychologically. But the real question is it good for us? Should we do these things? Not what happens when we do them, though we're getting closer to that. But is it good for us? Well, in the case of Rhett the Butler robot butler, I don't see any particular harm here. And I don't see a particular harm in general when we want to name our cars or ships or even some of these robots. As a general principle, as long as we know we're sort of playing along with and we're acting into this idea that it's an agent, we're probably okay. But where I get uneasy is when there are too many cues of agency in the machine, and then the engineers have indulged it with even more of these agent-like features.
Megan? We're gonna creep tonight. Oh, right. Look out, nice. What are you doing? Angry eyes won't look from hell can paralyze.
Such as speech interfaces. I mean, worse still would be making it human-like in shape or putting a face on it. But these speech interfaces, so that we can talk to it, like we see with Siri and Alexa, they're not only named, but they have voices, and they respond to our voices. And of course, we only talk, as I mentioned, even infants know you talk to intentional agents, and the things you talk to are intentional agents, right? It goes both ways. They're mutually activating kinds of conditions. So if I start talking to this machine, I'm activating my social cognition in my brain that says it's a person and the moral emotions that go along with that. And so maybe like me, you find yourself when you're dealing with one of these artificial intelligence kind of machines, especially those that have names, of using courtesies like, could you please do X? Or thank you very much for doing Y. We don't have to please and thank you machines, but somehow our social cognition tells us, oh, no, you really should. You've got a moral obligation, in a sense, to extend courtesies to this thing, which is strange. And I start getting very uncomfortable then when we're essentially playing along with a deception that then starts encouraging us to treat these like full-bodied other beings, because the risk there is that then we start relying on them as relationships, as social partners. And if we're relying on them as social partners, we're not relying on other people. So even something that seems as innocuous as asking Alexa to fact check something instead of looking it up in an encyclopedia or, doing just a Google search, or asking an expert in the room, right? You're cutting off the relationship with the expert in the room by not turning to them. You are cutting off your own searchability and your own problem solving by not trying to solve the problem yourself. So there can be some negative consequences socially and intellectually by treating some of these agents too much like persons. And really, for a lot of us, especially in fragmented kind of isolated worlds that we often live in, there's too big a risk. I know even in my house, there have been moments where I've felt it, my wife has felt it, where the vacuum robot gives us a sense of comfort, like there's someone else in the house when we're there alone. But notice then that we're letting that robot fill the void of loneliness, of need for companionship, instead of just letting it be a tool that cleans the floors. And my concern is that if we start naming it, if we start talking to it, it really amps up that tendency. It sort of splits that door wide open. Okay, so what about Rhett the Butler? That's just some fun naming. That's clever. Apparently, her car's name is Scarlet as well, so that's funny. Totally down with Rhett the Butler robot. A round machine bouncing around the house isn't likely to take the place of genuine human relationships or be the target of inappropriate affection. But if my colleague starts showing that she likes Rhett the robot butler a little bit more than her husband, frankly, then I'll begin to give a care. That's my 2 cents. As always, like, subscribe, share with other folks, and let us know. Leave comments. What would you like to hear me talk about? In the meantime, name your car, but don't let it become your best friend. Till next time.